Addicts. I am chair of our Western North Carolina Sierra Club, also called WNOCA. We have a Facebook, a website, and a meetup, and we would love for you to like us and use us on each of those 3 different formats. We are sending out action alerts all the time and ask you to write letters and to help us. We are part of the National Sierra Club and our state chapter of North Carolina. Of course, our motto is to explore, enjoy, and to protect the planet. Tonight, as you know, we are acknowledging that the land that we are on today is ancestral land of the Cherokee, and we thank them for protecting our forests and our environment for so many generations. We have some action alerts that we want to make you aware. As you are joining, if you will please mute yourself, you can leave on your video at our speaker's request, and you can reenact your video if it will allow you. But the first thing, we want you to please go on our website, which is wncSierraclub.org. It is right here to get the links. Here we go again with pipelines. Dominion Energy has petitioned the National Park Service to put a pipeline under our Blue Ridge Parkway at mile marker 393.3, which is right at the French Broad River. And if I'm understanding my numbers, that's kind of near the Arboretum. We only have until Saturday. So if you would please go to our website and get the link. We would love for you to write to the National Park Service. We've given you talking points on the web, certainly environmental impacts, questions of safety, questions, of course, on the pipeline, creating, again, global warming, and the need for longer time for public comments. Dominion had 4 years to create their request, and we have 1 month. And we're down to the last three days. I do want to give you good information. Boone, the city of Boone, right above us, is achieving 100% renewable energy by this February. Now, they're the first municipality in North Carolina to achieve 100% in municipal buildings. January 12th of last year, Boone allotted $60,000 to achieve this goal. 70% of it, 75% will go for solar, 25% will go for hydro, and they are 8 years ahead of schedule. Yay, Team Rob. The next good information is Governor Cooper. He signed his executive order 246 in January, like a month ago. And what this is doing is reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 50% over our baseline of 2005 by the target of 2030, and to go net zero by 2050 or as soon as possible. Now, his previous order in Executive Order 80 in 2018 had a goal of 40%, which of course he's reducing now to 50%, and a goal of 80,000 vehicles of zero emissions on the road. His other executive order 218 in June of last year is focusing on offshore wind. And the other good thing about this executive order is its equity and environmental justice focus, that each cabinet agency will have to have an environmental justice lead in that agency. However, there's another action alert for crypto mining. Please sign this petition. Please again go to our website, WNC Sierra Club, and join the petition to stop and regulate crypto mining. There is a link there that explains to you what this is, like Bitcoins, and evidently it's suggested that crypto mining is using 40 to 75% of the world's renewable energy. This is NBC's report. China has banned it, so there's a big scramble to set up massive computer rigs that are linked together in rural US with no zoning. And right now, Cherokee County is a victim. It has no zoning, and it has constant 24/7 noise and vibration for a 5-mile radius. And the estimation is that a third of their energy is going to these massive computers. Our next online program, which is a month from now, March 3rd, always the first Thursday of each month, again on Zoom, again 7 p.m., is our Nantahala-Pisgah Forest, the future of our Western North Carolina forest. The Nantahala-Pisgah revision plan was issued January 21st. There's exactly a 60-day objection period, and we are certainly going to talk about what has been written in the revision plan. And some of our big concerns is that they've only listed half of the wilderness area that we and the partnership has recommended, and that they have put some of our most treasured land, including some old growth, into areas that can be managed to be logged. So we're very concerned about the amount of timber harvesting. And now, as you know, I will introduce Drew Jones of Climate Interactive, who has been with us multiple times over the years. He is fresh from the Glasgow Summit. And when you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we will ask Drew at the end, and we will stop perhaps midway and answer some of your questions that you have put in chat. So, all right, Drew, introduce yourself and take it away.
All right. Hey, everybody. Happy to see a lot of familiar faces, some old friends. I see, hey, Sunita and Grace and Dee and hosts Ken and Judy. And a lot of you I got to see. We used to have all these, for so many years, this meeting at the UU Church, getting to see so many of you, just keeping you up to date with what we're learning from these trips to the United Nations negotiations. And I'm excited to be here and talk with you, even though we can't be together in person. What are you going to do? Here we are. But for people who haven't met, I'm here in Asheville. I've been here for 25 years now and running this think tank that the first time I presented to you was 5 of us. We're now 14 people and another 9 contractors, so 25 people. Climate Interactive being the team that uses simulation models that come out of MIT. We work closely with them to build models that add up all of the actions people are taking around the world to see where are we headed and then what is needed to get us where we really want to go, which is towards a stable climate and a sustainable future. So that's us. And in particular, I'm going to share a little bit more about what we're doing and what I saw in Glasgow, just to reaffirm a little bit of what Climate Interactive is doing. So we, and I hope all of us, envision a thriving world where those greenhouse gas emissions that we see are going down steeply. And we do that by creating and sharing simulations, not to create just a stable climate, but also an equitable future, climate and equity together. So a little bit of how we're using this, mostly with top decision makers. Here we had an hour and a half with Jay Inslee of Washington State a little while ago. His finger on the mouse of this simulation I'll play with in a minute. Representative Kathy Castor in the House of Representatives. And what we do with those folks is play with our simulator. So this is going to be kind of nerdy, but I think you can get it. We're going to be playing with this simulator, and what's kind of fun about it is it runs really fast. So if we have energy efficiency, you can see the lines move. So these are things that would change energy demand, which would change emissions and change temperature into the future. So in a minute, I'm going to be asking you what you think is going to be really needed. And I'm going to share a little bit about what's been happening in Glasgow that is going to make a difference. We build these models, but it's also available in 14 languages. So when we give it away, people around the world can use the model to engage their leaders. These are places around the world where people have written us to say, I've used En-ROADS to engage our leaders in some place. So really around the world, mostly the US and Europe, but it's growing and growing, particularly with 14 languages. And now we have a free course online. So as we check in, I'm going to be using chat, and I just want to see where you're at and get a little bit from you all. So if you would, I'm just curious about, as you come to this challenge, or the climate challenge overall, would you go into chat? So you'll see in Zoom, maybe there's a bar that has a bunch of different buttons on it. You may need to scroll around and see if you can find it, but would you type into chat? Just want to hear where you're at before I start telling you all about Glasgow and how I'm feeling about the climate challenge. So look to chat, go to it, and in a message to everyone, you can select who you're writing to everyone, if you would, right there. And I'm going to write in my first one here, and you'll see it in there. Gail's asking a good question, and I know, Judy, you're going to be grabbing all these questions. Can we help with the data mining threat, is Gail's question. But my big question to you right now is, Ken writes, very concerned. I think you wrote that it says to waiting room participants, but yep, very concerned. So concerned, thank you. D is saying, read Ministry for the Future. Yes. Water issues. I'm here for optimism, backed by fact, says Doc. Fear for my grandchildren. Mother Nature. What can I do, says Jerry. Great concern about where we're headed as a species and a planet. This is exactly what I need. Thank you, Anne. Where are you at? What do you think of, when you think of climate, what are you thinking? Love it. Thank you. I want to do more than write checks, says Ginny. Permafrost, yikes. This is the stuff that's trapping carbon dioxide and methane as the land melts, particularly in frozen areas, could release that, or it is releasing methane and carbon dioxide. Betsy says, in trouble, special focus on Western North Carolina's challenges, flooding, landslides. Jerry says, energy consumption and production, loss of wildlands. Betsy. Sunita, hi Sunita, growing sense of alarm, but still hopeful for making a better world as we adapt. Plant-based diet key, says Jerry. Extreme weather, hydrogen transition. I don't want to think it is too late, Doc. Hoping that raising the vibration on the planet, humanity will unite in order to save her. All boundaries must be forgotten. Oh, sunshine, some poetry, love it. Local or global. All right, with that, thank you. So helpful to know where you're coming from. I'm gonna share first, just, you didn't get, many of you, I think, didn't get to go to Glasgow. So I'm gonna show you some pictures of what was there in Glasgow, Scotland when I was there. So that's a huge, that's not a picture of a dome. That is a huge sphere of earth that hung over the area where people would schmooze around and talk. And there I am with our newest employee, Bindu Bandari from Kathmandu, Nepal, who had been playing our games around the world. And we hired her to teach other people how to play the game and run our models. Did some work with the press. This is Edie Lush in an interview. We ran a workshop, and these are some of the people who lead our workshop. And there's the model behind us, but some of our workshop leaders all getting together. They made presentations, but a lot of our time is in networking with others. This is David Gums from the Global South program at Rocky Mountain Institute, playing with the model that we're going to show you in a minute. There were maybe 30 young people going around the negotiation halls with all the same t-shirts. Let's talk about nuclear. I know this came up just a minute ago, folks here on this call. Everybody under, it seemed, 25, very positive, happy, cheery. And on the back, it said, just one gummy bear of uranium is the same energy as a ton of coal. So it's just interesting to see the lobbies that get out there and what everybody is making a case for. They had a huge presence in these negotiations. Outside of the negotiation halls, as you walked in, there was maybe a quarter mile, a long walk area, very well protected. But along the sides, a lot of activists came out. And so I just took pictures of them and thought I'd share some with you. War causes climate change. Climate change causes war. A feedback process that these folks wanted to point out. I hope this guy's ironic. Human life is overrated. Support global warming. So he was a little edge to his advocacy. A lot of pressure, particularly from youth, about keeping fossil fuels in the ground directly. A lot of pressure from that community. Stop drilling, keep 1.5 alive. I'll talk more about that, about stopping exploration and drilling of fossil fuels. These folks outside at night, we are watching. That's an Extinction Rebellion logo there. Bojo, I don't know who Bojo is, fiddles as Rome Burns. This is at a big outdoor rally. Greta Thunberg was one of the speakers here. This hit home because I was a boy in a suit. Boys in suits, Mother Earth is not happy. She had her drum. This guy called COP26 a fossil fuel fiasco. This sticker, so there were signs all over for UN Climate Change Conference 2021, and then this no net zero. So a lot of corporations, as you know, are talking about net zero emissions, but some of them are doing it with some phony math. So there's a lot of pressure against net zero as a way for a business to talk about its commitments. This is at the big rally: tax the carbon, stop the carbon, change the system, not the climate. And of course, there are many things that happen other than preventing climate change. Loss and damage finance is the effort to raise money to pay for adaptation, particularly for the global south and for countries and people who are the most vulnerable. Big pressure on loss and damage. So those are the big four goals here. I mentioned mitigation, finance is number 3, adaptation, getting ready for what's coming, and then global collaboration. So those are the big 4. And now what I wanted to do was to tell you what we heard that was announced there and talked about, and what it would do into the future, how much it would make a big difference. But first, I just want to start. I know we're talking about the things that are going to add up, but I wanted to start first. If in chat you would write, what are some of the things that you see that get talked about a lot, but you as a big solution to this challenge, but you think that they're not? I want to just start with that, because that's one thing that we're really watching for, is false solutions. I'm spending a lot of time writing and gearing up to a big campaign about this. So false solutions. Betsy Wall saying carbon tax is a false solution. Maybe write more about what feels like, I know there are many challenges to it, but yeah, so carbon tax. What are some others? And I'm looking now in chat and reading what you're writing. Just recycling helps in many ways around landfills, but perhaps not much on climate. What are others that you see talked about a lot, but feel like false solutions and may not be as high leverage as we need? Clean coal. It's the idea of carbon capture and storage. Clean coal, this idea, the big oxymoron that is clean coal. Gas CCS, or carbon capture and storage, would be another example of that. Maybe some more, a few more before I grab one. Feeding cows seaweed. Yeah, that one might not add up as well. We might do the math. Dot talks about nuclear power. You know, this came up several times. Maybe I'll just start with that one. Nuclear. So nuclear power, let's start there. So we're going to go with that one as the first one to test. But first, I really ought to show you just the basics of what we're simulating here with En-ROADS. So in this En-ROADS world, we're going to test nuclear power relative to this world that we're creating. And in this world, over in the top left, you can see coal in brown, on top of it, oil. And this is in a graph from 2000 all the way out to 2100. I'll make it even bigger for those sitting back on their couch looking at the computer from a distance. So brown is coal, on top of it, the red is oil, blue is natural gas, then wind and solar, bioenergy, and on top of it, nuclear. So if we assume this is where our energy comes from in the world, and we add to it methane and other gases like the F gases or nitrous oxide, that gives you all of this, what's right here, the greenhouse gas net emissions, this graph in the top right. I'm going to make it bigger. And this is the pollution that's causing the problem. Burning coal, oil, and gas, these other gases, causes temperature to go up, as acting as this kind of blanket around Earth. You see here in 2021, we modeled the COVID blip. You see that little bump? Emissions have dropped a little bit, but they're expected to go back up. There's the little COVID blip that we see. So if this is all the pollution, then we get temperature going all the way up to 3.6 degrees Celsius or 6.5 Fahrenheit, which is a world that we can't adapt to, really. And I can look at some graphs later, but just suffice it to say, we want to get that down, as you know, well below 2 degrees, but really 1.5. That's going to be our challenge. Someone suggested maybe nuclear isn't that big a solution, and I'm going to test it here using the simulator. The way we do that is I'm going to click over to the right, and you're going to watch. You see that Carolina blue wedge in the top left. It's going to increase if we subsidize nuclear in this imagined future. But I'd like you to think 3.6 goes where? Does it go all the way down to 2 degrees? Now, when I ask conservatives, many people are so excited about nuclear that they'll say it goes all the way down to 2 or 1.5. What would you guess? Maybe just people in chat, if you would. Anybody have some guesses about where this is going to go? If we go to above the highest estimate that the International Nuclear Energy Association thinks is possible. So if you would, 3 degrees says Doc, 3.5 says Bruce. So maybe all the way down to 3, maybe just 3.5 says Bruce. Others, write into chat, what's your guess? And you'll notice we don't want to use this as an answer machine. This is a learning tool. It's a thinking tool. So I'm asking you to run what we call your mental model, the one between your ears. Cindy says all the way to 2 degrees, 3.4. So you can see the wide diversity of opinions. What's it going to do? So here it comes. Actually, I'll show it here. I'm going to subsidize it a lot. And boom, I hit this button. Oh, wait, that's new zero carbon. That's a new energy source. That's not what I wanted to do. Sorry. Let's do nuclear, uranium-based nuclear. So we boost it up and watch it again. You can see greenhouse gas net emissions go down. You see the Carolina blue wedge there in the top left. It expands, and 3.6 only goes to 3.5. What? It's getting sold as if it's like the big solution. And some people say, oh, if we don't have nuclear growth, we can't do this. So I'm gonna let me pull up nuclear in this graph. So I'm going down to primary energy demand, and we're gonna look, and there are hundreds of graphs underneath the ones that you see. If we look at nuclear, here's the test we just did. Instead of it being the black line, it goes all the way up to the blue line. Now, mind you, this is more than the industry association thinks is likely, or even at the high end. It's not doing that much. Now, why? Why is it not helping? Well, why it helps at all is it's succeeding at edging out a little bit of coal, but not so much, and edging out a little bit of natural gas, but not so much. And it takes a long time. It takes a long time for this to grow and displace natural gas, such that it's not the 2040s. It does a little bit in the 2030s, but it takes a long time for this industry to keep coal and gas in the ground. Also, the way it grows, I think it has a little bit of an effect. Well, not much, but the way it grows around the world is that it's cheap. And if it's cheap, What happens to our incentive to work on energy efficiency? It reduces that just a little bit. So you'll notice as I run that scenario with more nuclear, actually energy demand goes up a little bit because energy, there's cheap nuclear around the world. We use more, and that has this effect. All right, so we can see, and there's a whole series of other things that if you're curious, go to the model and try it yourself that are like this. I'm calling them these kind of like false solutions, things that get talked about a lot that aren't as helpful. Now, if you're at your computer and you like playing with models like this, I'm going to actually share this nuclear scenario with you. So if I'm going to copy that and then go into chat, and I'll just send it to the whole group. If you'd like, click on the link there and you'll, in your browser, see the model itself. There's a whole series of other solutions that are like this. If we invented thorium fission, I'm testing that now. Temperature only goes down to 3.4. Even growing lots of trees, we need to grow trees. And I've never said to the Sierra Club, we shouldn't. We want more trees, but the idea of 1 trillion trees, when we test it, is a very modest reducer of greenhouse gas emissions. There are several other things like this. Someone mentioned carbon capture and storage of coal, clean coal. Is a similar small effect. Okay, so there are a bunch of things that are not silver bullets that get talked about as silver bullets. The good news is that in Glasgow, there were things that were talked about that actually do help. And I'm going to start, someone mentioned carbon pricing. We're going to start with carbon pricing. Right now, 21% of global emissions are covered by a carbon price. So if you just make coal, oil, and gas more expensive, the energy from it more expensive, which would then reduce how much it's used. So 21% of global emissions are now covered. You can see what percentage it grows over time, all the way up to 21 now. The pricing is pretty low. It's in the $20 to $30 to $40 a ton. So that's the first thing I'm going to put in, is that the world actually does have kind of modest, but there is carbon pricing that is happening and could happen more around the world. If you average it out, it's only about $8 a ton, which is very low. That's like 6 cents on a gallon of gas, not a big change to how much oil we use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in this $8 a ton. Little guess, of course, when you increase it really high, look what a huge difference it makes. It could, if we have high carbon prices, and we could look at it again later, it could make a big difference. But here we are, and I'm just saying this is what we have today, is a very modest carbon price. And when you see me put it in, you notice the top left, all of those little lines went down a little bit, a little less coal, a little less oil, a little less gas, more wind and solar. So it helps just a little bit. In Glasgow, there was some talk, and the biggest news really around coal. So COP26, you may have see these headlines. World agrees to phase out fossil fuel subsidies and reduce coal. So 40 countries now say they're going to phase out coal. Not just for the climate benefit, for the air quality benefit. 23 of these countries are new to this group. So it was a big day in Glasgow when 23 new countries said, we're going to do this. We're going to phase out coal. Now, bad news, it's not the United States of America, not India, not China, Australia, South Africa. So some really big players are still in this game. The other bad news is that we had thought, and I remember saying to you all in the Sierra Club meeting, that China had peaked its coal production. Well, it popped back up. And so they peaked well, they may have peaked, but it went up again. So there's some good news and bad news. But more good on coal. The International Energy Agency said that India is going to build 86% less coal than they said a year ago. So canceling coal production, and we were successful, you all were successful in making that happen several years back here with the coal-fired power plant in our area. This is so critical, and it really is the low-hanging fruit for climate benefits. 80% of coal-fired power plants planned in Asia have been shelved. So we may not see the kind of coal growth that we had feared in the past. So if here we are at 3.5, if we add on top of that, I'm going to change this down to a pretty significant, the equivalent of a huge tax on coal of 70. Watch the change in the top left of the brown area of shrinking coal. Now, it doesn't get rid of it entirely, but now, mind you, here we are with less coal. We could also imagine, what if we could not just have it be pressured or taxed, but a huge, huge reduction would be, what if we were able to ban all coal infrastructure? So I'm scrolling down here, stop building new coal infrastructure, look at the brown area, I hit that button, and then you just totally eliminate it. So get rid of coal, and that brings us all the way down to 3.2. Now you may be thinking, wait, I thought this would be 2 degrees. There's no silver bullet. Banning all coal in the world is not a silver bullet. We're not looking for a silver bullet. We're looking for silver buckshot, as Bill McKibben said. Many actions across the system. I like to say that it takes many seeds to plant this garden. Don't look for the one thing. Many system. So when we have coal go down, what happens to natural gas? So if you have less coal, we have what we call the squeeze the balloon problem. Shrink it in one area, then it grows in another. So in this scenario, we have to think, oh no, another fossil fuel, a lower carbon density fossil fuel, but still a fossil fuel, would boost up. So we're going to need to do some things to address that. All right, so what we've done so far is we have a modest carbon price. We've banned coal around the world. What else did Glasgow say was going to happen? Well, it said, COP26 said world leaders promised to end deforestation by 2030. That's a big deal. 100 countries, 85% of the world's forests end deforestation by 2030. Now, there are many, many reasons to end deforestation beyond the climate benefit, for biodiversity, all sorts of reasons. That said, let's look at what kind of contribution it makes to climate. And I want you to get a little perspective on how much emissions actually come from chopping down trees, Indonesia, Brazil, burning them mostly for agricultural land, palm oil. You see this over on the right. Look at this graph. This is all of the sources of pollution, greenhouse gas net emissions. And you can see stacked on top of each other. So see that big dark area? That is burning coal, oil, and gas. And it used to be, before we put in the carbon price and we banned coal, it was way up here. I'm undoing those two actions. Now I'm going to do them again. By carbon price, it went down. Banning coal, it went down, but it's still a lot. On top of it is F gases like HFCs and methane in blue and nitrous oxide. That little green band at the bottom is the contribution from burning trees, converting forests to agricultural land. So it's relatively small. So you shouldn't be surprised that when we implement this policy, watch in the top right, the green area shrink. Do you see that? It shrinks and it cuts out 0.1 degree. Again, not a silver bullet, not a huge contributor to reduced warming. However, important for many reasons and part of silver buckshot, you could say, of the many things that will come together. So sometimes gets exaggerated that people think it's a much bigger deal. It's very important for many reasons. We should do it. All right, we're at 3.1 degrees. And I'm just going to pause. Judy, have you seen any questions that have come up? I know I'm throwing a lot at you guys in this model, asking you to follow a big old mathematical model on this. Judy, has anything come up that you think is worth pausing for? I should just keep rolling.
Well, let me read you the few, Drew. How about the reduction or elimination of meat eating? What do you and Sierra Club think about pumped hydro for long-term green energy storage? As individual, doing my part, but not seeing a lot of change because being taken by others. It looks like everybody's waiting for the government or somebody else to do it.
Yeah, great.
Did you see the New York Times video on ag impacts as significant as petro impacts agriculture?
So there's a couple questions about ag and meat. And so I'm going to go over there once we get to the chance for everyone to suggest some things. So it's great to see some of what you guys are thinking about. And those are going to be over in the far right in this methane area over on the right. So let's keep rolling with what's coming up and what was promised. Of course, the meat is really connected to deforestation because a lot of the reason we're chopping down trees is to grow food to feed to cattle. So one of the ways that we can get less deforestation, it'll be necessary to reduce demand for meat. But the other big pledge that came out of Glasgow was about electrification of transport. So this article said, COP26 sees pledges to transition to electric vehicles, but key countries are mum. So what happened was Volvo, Ford, GM, Mercedes, Jaguar all said, yes, we're in, we will commit to 100% electric at some point. VW, Toyota said, no, we're not doing that. And China, importantly, that's the key country, said, we are not committing ourselves to significant electrification, but they may do it anyways. So let's see what that would do. Now, when we have a world where we've already cut out coal, this is a good time to put in electrification. If you don't kill coal, some places will electrify transport and get that electricity from coal, which would be really rough and a kind of a negative system impact. So here we are with electrified transport. I'm going to increase this all the way up to 70% globally. And you can see it's no silver bullet, but it is another contributor to getting us closer to 2 degrees. I'm going to pull up how it helps. Here we are with oil. What is here? Let me see. I'm going to do it again. We were up here. Look at this huge, large reduction in oil. Now, mind you, it's still growing in the long term. It hasn't killed the oil industry. We're going to have to do more on that. We've banned infrastructure on on coal. We've electrified, but in the long term, the oil industry would love to grow unless we do something on the demand side or with carbon pricing. So here we are. We've put together several things. We're at 3 degrees, come down from 3.6, and then that brings us to methane. So probably the biggest news was the global methane pledge. And in this one, 100 countries said they would reduce 30% by 2030. 105 now, we see. I think it's some more even added in. So methane, not carbon dioxide, but methane that comes from energy, it comes from cattle, it comes from landfills, from wastewater, growing rice. What would it do? And it's really connected to some of the things that people were talking about a few minutes ago around cows and some of the things that you just mentioned. So I'm going to go back here and we're going to look at what could happen to methane in the future. Now, it's already a little bit lower without any direct action on methane. That's just because we've turned the carbon pricing and electrification, reduced natural gas and coal. And so leakage from those industries and is gone down already. So what if we get significant cuts to methane? And I'm going to go in here and say what? I'll say minus 35% of the potential. So methane has a huge potential to reduce future temperature. Huge, as in 0.2 degrees is a big deal, and actually would be a little bit more if we hadn't done those energy actions. So 3.0, 2.8, another significant contribution, not a silver bullet, because there isn't one, but another action that gets us closer. So put all those things together, and here we are, not going to 3.6, but heading towards 2.8. Those were the big actions that came out of Glasgow. And so when you see reports with all the pledges around the world and you say current policies, people talk about, some people believe that current policies that we see today could be heading us in that area of 2.7 to 3 degrees, but we really want to get down to 1.5. So I'm going to turn it back over to you all. What else do we need to do? And here we are. I see people suggesting things, and Beth said, educate illiterate women and girls. So there's some confidence that if we're able to educate women and girls, empower women, we would see slower population growth. So I'm going to put that in. I have to move some things around. And of course, this is really contentious, and it's very difficult being part of the international conversation for the developed world to be going to the developing world and doing things to talk about lower birth rates. It's been really challenging in these international spaces. It could happen that we get lower population growth. Let's see what happens if we do. Tread lightly on this topic internationally, my friends. But here we are, we're headed in a world of about 11 billion people. What if we're at the lower end of the UN scenarios, more like 10 or more like 9? 9 is the lowest end of these modeled scenarios right now. So watch, and what does it do? It reduces demand for energy around the world. That means less emissions. That means less temperature. It's no silver bullet. It is yet another piece of silver buckshot. Higher carbon tax, says Louis or Lewis. Energy conservation. Energy conservation, higher carbon tax. Let's try a couple of those things. So energy conservation, absolutely. Let's go back here and see what a huge contribution. Here's where energy demand is. The top line of this is overall energy demand. What if we have aggressive insulation, efficient motors, lighting, appliances, all these things that we can do? What if people insulate, better windows in their houses? I know, Dee, you've taught me some things about that. So watch as I crank that up, and watch energy demand shrink significantly, and we're down at 2.5. Down at 2.5 if we have energy efficiency in buildings and industry. But it also needs to happen in transport, public transportation, efficient land use design to use transportation hubs, efficient cars, efficient buses, shipping, etc. Watch this reduction and watch what happens to the red band of oil. Less oil, 2.4. And reduce refrigeration emissions. So actually, when I moved methane and other, that is changing HFCs and some of those other gases, and it could be reduced even more. 2.4 goes down to 2.2. Someone said higher carbon price. Absolutely, crank up that carbon price, then we get to 1.9, 1.9. Other things, cement is actually part of our industrial use here. Electrifications of buildings and industry. So if we are able to electrify, we can use more of the wind and solar that we have. Now we're at 1.8, and encouraging renewables, possibly some research into new zero carbon energy. Now, mind you, it's getting more challenging to get down to 1.5. It's very difficult to do this without now focusing on carbon removal. So 1.8 by reducing all these emissions, but to get all the way down to 1.5, our goal, what would be necessary is to imagine industries at work around the world in carbon removal. I'm going to try a couple things here. We can crush up rocks, spread it on land. There are machines that could pull carbon out of the atmosphere. If we don't till the soil, we can retain more carbon in the soil, agricultural soil conservation. We can grow trees, burn those trees for energy, capture it. These are all speculative. We don't know their impacts yet. And there's some many important equity concerns if we did it. So if we did a lot, we could get all the way down to 1.5 if we put all those things together. So this silver buckshot possible scenario into the future. What did we do? So much. We banned coal, high carbon price. Imagine clean energy, aggressively in energy efficiency and electrification, and nature-based climate solutions in refrigeration, but also in other pollutants, methane, less cattle, also carbon removal, and educating women and girls. Putting it all together, it still could be possible to imagine a scenario where we limit warming to 1.5 degrees. People talk about net zero. This is net zero. Net CO2 emissions right here. This is what we talk about when we say net zero. CO2 emissions, instead of going up, fall steeply. Mid-century, hit zero and actually go net zero, start pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. Still possible. I've been hollering at you really intensively through this last 50 minutes. But what I want you to do is just pause, and we're going to be silent for a full 60 seconds. And I'd like you to consider, what would you love about being part of a world on track to making something like this happen? What would you love? Think of all the things you could see here in Western North Carolina, here in Asheville, all the things coming together. What would you love about being part of a Sierra Club, a city, a Buncombe County, a North Carolina, your neighborhood, your family? What would you love about being part of the world on track to making something like this happen? Let's just be silent, 60 seconds. That's a minute. Longest minute of my day. Gosh, who thought 60 seconds could take that long? So write in chat. I want to see, hope is a choice. Hope is something that we create. It's not a sense that we're going to win. It's that choice every day to say there's something that we want, that we're dedicating ourselves to. And I want to hear what we're dedicating ourselves to. What is the thing we would love about a future like this and being part of it? Creating hope, D, thank you. Connecting with people one-on-one, seeing people, erasing boundaries, thinking global. Thank you, Sunshine. Could someone else write what came to mind in that minute? What you would love? Less anxiety, Beth. Absolutely. Less anxiety. Thank you. I want to stay warm and have light. You make the rest sound possible. Yes, where the next generation does not live in fear. Quiet, respectful collaboration. Thank you, Jerry. Clearer vistas and quieter. Lower healthcare bills. A bike lane on Merriman, which I hear is coming. lower healthcare bills, confidence that future generations will flourish. Well said, Mary. Please, others, write what you would love about being on track to seeing a world like this come into be. Others, write into the chat. We'd love to see what you would love about such a world. Stop the sixth extinction. Well said, Christine. Well said. Absolutely. Maybe one more. Maybe one more. Making our world a better place for all beings. Peace. Believing my grandkids have a future. Better mental health. Thank you, Jack. All right. So what's the journey we've been on? I've told you that I went to Glasgow. I asked you about a bunch of the things that are lower leverage that are getting a lot of attention that we shouldn't put as much energy in. And then a bunch of things that came out of Glasgow. Deforestation, electrification, methane, less coal, overall pledges and carbon pricing. And then I asked you, what are the other things that we need to make happen? And what we saw is there's no silver bullet. There's no one thing. And it's still possible. It's still possible. Biogeochemically, it's still possible. Socioeconomically, it could happen. We can bend that curve. How did we do it? It takes silver buckshot. It's going to take action at many levels and across sectors. We're not searching for the one big thing that's going to get us there. Central to it is keeping coal, oil, and gas in the ground. There's no scenario that gets where we want to go where we don't stand up to that industry that's been so tough. And one of the coolest things in Glasgow, actually, were the people who were finding the courage to talk about cutting production. I couldn't get into this meeting on the production gap report, which shows all the country's plans to dig up coal, oil, and gas. And there are groups such as the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance that's trying to get folks like you mentioned that Dominion pipeline, stop infrastructure of coal, oil, and gas. These are the countries that have signed on, and the youth movement is signing on to the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. This is one of the biggest movements I saw, one of the new things. And we just saw recently a federal judge citing the climate crisis and the decision to cancel oil and gas leases in the Gulf of Mexico. So this whole movement to stop production of coal, oil, and gas will be necessary. No silver bullet, still possible with silver buckshot. We need to keep coal, oil, and gas safely in the ground and protect equity along the way. So that's the overall journey. And you told me some of the things that you care about that lead you to want to dedicate yourself to the good work that Judy and Ken and your team here at Sierra Club are leading you towards, because you're on the right track of doing the things that are really needed. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Judy, what's come up? What are the other questions I can answer about this whole thing as we dedicate ourselves to these results?
Well, one question, you've had a lot of chat encouragement here, but one that you haven't dealt with, given how much heat is already built up in the oceans, isn't it almost impossible to keep global heating to 1.5?
Given all that, so when I showed you those curves and I showed you 1.5 degrees, that is considering and modeling with great precision all of the heat in the ocean. So that is the reason why temperature doesn't go down to 0 degrees, because of so much of that heat in the ocean. But yes, we considered that, and it is still possible to limit warming to 1.5 given the heat in the ocean. Thank you.
It's a taboo subject, but does population reduction ever get talked about?
Reduction as in actively fewer and fewer people?
Don't know. I mean, certainly population control, but you just said be very careful internationally, talking about birth control, I'm assuming, but
Mm.
to cut down population.
It's just sad that we're there ethically so it's very difficult to imagine in any way a policy to eliminate people or to address this challenge. So I think I'm just gonna pass. Yeah, that's taboo. It would be difficult to reconcile, like, who chooses, who dies, and all that. We can decarbonize, we can do things. Let's focus on the things that we know work, that are in line with our ethics. Yeah. All right. What else?
And I think you already mentioned certainly education for women and girls, and certainly illiterate.
As ways to reduce population growth. Absolutely. Yeah, those things could work.
Yes. You want to talk about regenerative agriculture more?
Yeah, so many of the solutions that I showed on methane and deforestation would require regenerative agriculture. That would be a policy that would help get those huge cuts in methane and carbon dioxide that would be needed. Absolutely part of it. And also the soil carbon retention that you saw. We talked about pulling more carbon out of the atmosphere. That requires regenerative agriculture.
Could you explain what regenerative agriculture is?
Yeah, so there's so many methods of organic agriculture that is less dependent on fossil fuel-based nitrogen fertilizer inputs, more use of the waste in agriculture, less tilling. Some of these practices, less methane emissions, less carbon emissions. Others that you're seeing here?
Is there a danger of, if carbon pricing is high enough to make a difference, that consumers will rebel, such as what happened in France with the yellow jackets?
Yeah, boy, this is going to be the big challenge of bringing in it's such a powerful policy, and it's so challenging because it would raise energy prices, and poorer people, marginal people in marginalized communities spend a larger percentage of their household costs on energy. So some of the things that Citizen Climate Lobby is proposing is a dividend of the money that's generated back to citizens to deal with that fact that energy prices would be higher. So this is a big challenge that we all face, how to pass these policies in ways that don't bring the kind of pushback that we saw in France and we think might shut down this policy around the world. Yeah, it's a big challenge.
What do you and Sierra Clubs think about pumped hydrogen for long-term green energy storage?
Yeah, I lived down in an area in Colorado where they would pump, pumped hydrogen? Pumped hydrogen, not pumped water. So we're starting to study it. We don't know that much, but I'll defer to someone else, Dee or Ken or Judy. Do you know about pumped hydrogen? No. Okay.
It's
So
pumped hydro. It is pumped water.
Oh, it's pumped water. Okay. So this happens a lot. I saw it out in Colorado. Yeah. So you pump the water using the energy when it's more available, and then you let it come down through your turbines at a time when it's needed. And it's a good idea. Got to address the ecological effects of the dams, but I'm generally pro, but I haven't looked into it too deeply. We definitely need new ways to store energy. Others?
Are most countries adhering to or meeting the targets that they have established from previous summits?
Yeah, so back in Paris, so many countries committed to the Paris Agreement, set their pledges, and they said they're going to reduce emissions 30%, 40%, 50%, 10%. The range of commitment so far seems to be on track to about 70 or 80% of following the actual pledges. And we have to consider that when we model where we think things are headed. So no, they're not following them fully. And particularly here in the US, where first we had those 4 years of Trump, And then we had what hit me as a pretty major disappointment when we didn't get the infrastructure bill and all the climate measures that we really dreamed of. So we're not on track to deliver on those pledges. That's why when I showed you where we're headed, it was more like 2.7. And I said, we're going to need to do a lot more to get to 1.5.
And a question about green hydrogen storage.
Yeah, so green hydrogen could be a way to transfer wind and solar into something used in transportation. We're just starting to model it. It's no silver bullet. It gets discussed, particularly in Europe, as it is, as if it was a silver bullet. It's not, but we think it could be part of the silver buckshot. We're still modeling it, however, so we don't have the numbers.
Some of the solutions meet other goals that we have, like protecting biodiversity, protecting water
Absolutely.
cycles, and these should be prioritized over other solutions.
We need to find co-benefits. Some of the best that are here are in air quality, biodiversity, resilience, health, so many co-benefits that we should capture. They don't come unless we try. So we should really make sure that our policies do what we call multi-solve, address climate, but also these other goals at the same time. In fact, we just spun off a new institute yesterday called the Multi-Solving Institute. Its website is 24 hours old. So if you're curious about this idea, capturing co-benefits, our co-founder here at Climate Interactive actually just spun off a part of our company into Multi-Solving Institute. Do we have divesting in our models? So the things that increase the cost of coal, oil, and gas are basically the effect of divesting. So yes, and it helps when we make it more expensive for the oil industry and the gas industry to get access to capital. We grow that industry less, reducing emissions. If Build Back Better doesn't pass, what more else can be the current administration do? Wow. We should definitely be focusing more on reducing production and exploration of coal, oil, and gas. Friends, we as the United States are the largest producer of oil and gas in the world. The United States is the largest producer, not just the using side, but this whole movement or just the trend of continuing to talk about climate action and trying to do things, but not really focusing on the fact that we're the ones with the biggest role of finding the oil and the gas, digging it up and selling it to people. We should be doing more in that area, and Biden hasn't been doing so much. That's one big push. I'm actually going to DC to meet many of these folks in a couple of weeks, so I'll know more after that. Others that you see, Judy?
We'd love it if you would like to write an update, Drew, and we'll post that on
Cool.
your program here if you'd like to give us what's happening.
Yeah, so the workshop you just saw, I'm going to run 3 times in the first week of March for Gina McCarthy's domestic team, John Kerry's international team, and the State Department that does a lot of outreach. They're going to see the same presentation that you just saw. And actually yet another team, the White House Science Advisor, Eric Lander, and his energy team led by Sally Benson. So 4 workshops that we're going to be doing that first week of March, really going through the same darn thing you just saw. So happy to get the chance to lay it all out here, but I'll get to be in person in a couple weeks.
Great. Can you comment on cryptocurrency and how we need to control that and the incredible use of energy for crypto mining?
I was so surprised to see the numbers, Ken and Judy, that you had in that slide. What did that say? 40% of renewable energy, and they all moved to the Cherokee to use the energy there? Is this?
Because there's no zoning in Cherokee. Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
speechless. Someone else speak to this one. I don't know what to say.
My understanding is that the Biden administration in the infrastructure bill has mentioned it and has asked for more studies. My understanding as well that there are 42 countries that have put limits on it and 9 that have actually banned it. But obviously there are counties like Cherokee that have 0 zoning and that are just wide open to anybody in the world coming in, which is what
Wow.
happened.
Yeah.
Next question, isn't reducing methane this decade the most cost-effective measure rather than reducing carbon dioxide?
It's tough to say. We haven't done the math on which of them is most cost effective. The way to think about it is yes and. Like it's yes and. We need to do both so badly. I want to avoid the prioritizing between the two because it's so urgent. It's so incredibly urgent to do both. So go over that question, just say yes and we need to do both, and direct the folks who have control over agriculture and those areas and to do that. But keeping coal, oil, and gas, I would say is the highest priority because it is the thing that's causing warming the most. Fossil fuels. So do both, and let's not set ourselves up to have to choose between the two.
Green hydrogen could be a solution for ships, airlines, and large trucks. Comment.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mentioned before, like we're learning about it. It's no silver bullet, but it might be part of the ways to get more renewable energy into like the shipping industry, as you just mentioned, and other transportation.
With the Interior Department and parks with an indigenous leader, could this cause amazing change because of their different way of looking at nature?
I sure hope so. I sure hope so. It's tough for one person to change a system, but maybe she's got a shot. I hope so, because fossil fuel drilling on public lands is really important for us to cut. So I hope so.
If Build Back Better does not pass, what more can the current administration do?
Yeah, I think I spoke to that one when I read it out earlier. And this is where I was saying, let's look at production on the production side. And I see we're at the list at the bottom. I'm just checking on your timing. How much do you tend to go here after your hour time?
We're good, Drew. We're at the end and you're getting lots and lots of thank yous, and certainly from me and from Ken. Drew, you are exceptional and loved your presentation, love your simulation, and look forward to your update when you go to DC.
All right, well, just props back. The thing that we need is collective action. Collective action. People getting together in groups like the Sierra Club, building power, delivering power to change the policies of the world. So what we need, and the reason that I take the time to show up whenever you guys ask, we need more Sierra Clubs. We need more people like you all. So pull together, use your power to deliver on the vision that you have, that you laid out to me, that you love so much. So overall, go get them, everybody. I believe in you, and just appreciating the chance to get to talk with some friends.
You are wonderful, Drew. And last question, is there a recording version of this? Yes, it is our WNC Sierra Club website, wncsierraclub.org. It'll be posted probably in the next week. And please let me invite you to come back 1 month. March 3rd, 7 p.m. on Zoom, to please hear what is happening with our forests and the future of our Western North Carolina forests, and our concerns about more cutting, and are we sequestering our wilderness and our old growth. We have concerns. So please, everybody, return, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Drew, you were great. Thanks, everybody.
Great.
Thank you.